Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Joshua Brumley. He is an attorney and founder at Brumley Law Firm, pro tem judge, professor at Highline College, car crash rights educator. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Thank you so much for having me, AJ.
You are welcome to the show, Joshua. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I am sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about how one can run their law firm and also about how the car crash, car accident law process works in the US, especially in Washington, D.C. So welcome once again. My first question to you, Joshua, is to understand first, you are an attorney, I know that, but I want to tell, through you directly for the audience, a bit about your journey into this legal profession so that, they know more about you directly.
Yeah, so my name is Josh Brumley. I run a motor vehicle accident law firm in the Seattle, Washington area, the west coast of the United States. We have 4 offices. I have about 13 staff at this time, and a lot of car accident cases. Right now, it's actually very cold. We had a bit of a snowstorm over the last couple days, and car accidents are an inevitable part of living in a big city with that kind of weather.
Absolutely, absolutely. But first, into your journey as into the legal line. Why did you get in legal line, especially? And then we'll come to the car crash part of it. You specialize into that. I want to understand a bit of your journey. Is it
Sure.
very easy to become a lawyer in the US? In India, also, we have a very fledgling legal profession. So I want to understand, especially that part for the Indian audience.
Sure, sure. So in the United States, before entering into law school, you have to have a 4-year undergraduate degree, so a bachelor's degree. Your bachelor's degree can be in any studies, and then you apply for a law school. Law school is 3 more years of study. Some people do it in 2. That process is a total of 7 years.
Okay, okay. Now let's come to the car accident, part of the thing. Why did you get into, this particular specialization? And secondly, how did you decide? How does one decide which specialization is good for them? Sometimes, there are so many different branches of law. How do I know which is good for me? Because a lot of, times you also think about it as a lucrative profession if it can work for me. So that part of a guidance, being a legal, founder at your law firm, so that part I want to understand. And in your case, how did you decide, okay, this is the line I specialize in, so that people, it helps people also, especially those people
Sure.
who are getting into the legal profession.
Yeah, there's 2 different questions that I'm hearing there. One of them is really why start your own law firm, and then the other is why go into this area of law. And so I've always been an entrepreneur. My undergraduate degree is in business, and I always knew I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to build something. I wanted to lead people, and so I was always really passionate about being an entrepreneur. And that was something that led me to opening my own firm right out of law school. And when I first opened my law firm, I was actually doing various different types of law, kind of trying to find my niche. And so I did family law, divorces, and parenting plans. I've also done criminal defense work as a public defender and a private defense attorney. Business litigation. With my business background, I helped formation of businesses and deal with contract disputes. But truly, the best out of all of those that I've dipped my toe in was the personal injury world. There's not another area that I feel so passionate about, and there's this secondary benefit when you're working with family law clients, for example. you're collecting money from that client specifically. When you're working with a criminal defense client, you're collecting money from that client. And if you're a public defender, you're collecting money from the county, but it's about 10% of what that money would be if you were a private attorney. So it's much less for the exact same amount of work. And so many public defenders, in order to make up for that deficit, they'll take many, many cases. And that leads to the misunderstanding that a public defender is not a great lawyer. Many public defenders are incredible lawyers, but they're just overworked because their pay is based on how many cases they have instead of a salary. And so I did all of those things. I collected money from my clients, and it never felt great. If the client couldn't pay and I was really invested in their case, I had to make a decision between dropping them and doing what was best for my business, or continuing to work with them and doing what I thought was best for that client's life. And more often than not, I made bad business decisions that were right for that person because it was the right thing to do. But dipping into car accidents, you're actually collecting money from these insurance companies and still being able to be a zealous advocate for your client who's an injured person. And there's not that disconnect between the financial and business side of what you're doing. And I think a lot of business owners and attorneys are really disjointed in that regard. I think a lot of lawyers are not great business people, and so they have a hard time separating that understanding. So once I realized that I could work really hard for my clients and collect money from an insurance company rather than from the clients, it was a done deal for me.
Right, right, Joshua. So you are a car crash rights educator. So whose
Yes.
right do you talk about? Is it the victim? Is it the one who has done, or is it about both?
Well, my practice is about protecting victims and making sure that people understand when maybe there are other concerns in play, that they have someone that they can speak to about what those rights are. Sometimes people have immigration concerns in the United States that make them a bit more fearful of calling the police when they were the victim of a car accident, or maybe they have criminal implications for other issues, and that leads them to not call the police when they're the victim of a serious motor vehicle accident. My job, and I take it very seriously, is to educate people and equip them with the understanding that they need to be able to be successful, even if they don't work with my firm. I think it's really important for people to understand their rights, whether those rights be family law rights, criminal defense rights, or rights for being a victim of a personal injury incident.
Right, right, Joshua. So now let's understand this car accident cases from two angles. One is someone who is a U.S. citizen. Something happens on the road. What should they do and what should they not do if it happens? Secondly, a lot of people, say from India, they travel to the US. A lot of people from outside go on vacation or for anything. They have the license. Something happens on the road. Either if you are driving yourself, or if you are uh, going in a car, or in a as a traveler. What are the things that one should take note of when such a thing happens? So for a US citizen and for a non-US citizen who is there, what should they do, what should they not do when it is something that happens, even a simple car crash that happens on the road? As an individual, forget about the US legal system. I may not even know about a lot of things in such cases, even in India, or people may
Yeah.
not even know even in their own countries. Generally, people do not look at these things when they are in their day-to-day life. So as a lawyer, people who are visiting the US, what should they take care of? Also for the US residents who are US citizens, help us understand this part so that it educates. You are a car crash rights educator. It educates people who may be listening to this particular episode and many other that you will continue to do. You have a podcast yourself. So help us understand this part.
Yeah, I think the most important takeaway is that your rights as a non-US citizen are exactly the same as a US citizen's rights. If you're visiting here, or if you're a non-US citizen who has immigration concerns, I don't want anyone to think that this process is different for different levels of citizens or non-citizens. It's absolutely not. So if you come to the United States and you're injured in a car accident, your rights are the exact same as a US citizen's rights. And that process starts with photography and calling the police. And many people who are the at fault party in a car accident will try to convince you to not call the police. But it's your best protection, because if that person leaves the scene and you don't call the police and they do call the police, they get to create that narrative. And that narrative may blame you for the accident that you're a victim of. And that's incredibly difficult to overcome after the fact. Because if you haven't called 911 and asked for police to come out and to write a report about the incident, you're really just leaving it up for chance. And so protect yourself, protect your rights, protect your family, and call 911, call the police.
Right, right. A lot of people say if I go to the US and if I'm taking a car on rent and if I'm driving and if there is an incident, in that case, how does the law work? Secondly, sometimes someone may say, this has led to some minor, uh, uh, problem with the vehicle of someone else. So you settle it, you pay some money and that will be the end of it. How should one conduct this sort of a thing when you are in the US? Also, rights as a traveler. In case I am just traveling and somebody hits my car, what do I do? Should I get
Yeah.
into, if it's a small incident, I may want to forget it, but then should I forget it or not? As you said, someone else can file a case against you first, and then you might be problem. So should they ignore it? Should they not ignore it? Help us with that part. Also, you do practice a lot about car accidents in the Washington state. Does law differ from state to state there? In India, it's a bit of a much more unified laws in that sense. But I'm not very sure about the state laws in such. But generally, if I understand, the laws are very much universal in India, especially in cases of accidents. But a lawyer
Yes.
will be able to tell. But I want to understand about the US. Are laws very different in states? And is one law very different from one? Too much different, or is it almost the same?
So in the United States, a lawyer is licensed in the state that they practice, and you can be licensed in multiple states, but and for the most part, at least with car accidents, the claims process, which is the beginning of the process, is very similar. So while you need to be licensed in the state that you practice in, and I'm only licensed in the state of Washington, there are options for me to work with other attorneys in other states if I'm representing a client who was in an accident in another state. So the process is maybe different state to state, but for the most part, it's very unified, like you mentioned in India. So it begins with opening a claim. Now, you'd mentioned if someone's visiting and it's a minor accident, should they just forget it? And my answer is always going to be no, because that person might say later on that you crashed into them, that you caused damage to their car, and so by trying to pay a couple $100s cash and hope that you can get your bumper fixed, I don't think that you're doing yourself justice to protect yourself. And there's additional concerns with your health that might not come into play immediately, but might come into play weeks later. And if you're not protecting yourself when the accident occurs, you're opening yourself up, if those injuries are actually really severe later on, to not being able to recover money for those injuries. So we always, always, always want you to start the process working with an attorney in the United States in this industry is actually the most affordable way to work with an attorney out of any other practice area. So in family law, in criminal defense, in business litigation, there's options for paying an attorney up front to get that legal advice that you need. And sometimes those industries will allow payment plans and lots of different things. In car accidents, we actually work in a completely different way called contingency fee. So you don't pay an attorney any money up front to work with an attorney to have the best service that they offer. They just get a percentage of the recovery that they earn for you at the end of the case. So there's no reason not to do at least a free consultation with an attorney while you're in the United States in any state. We all collectively do car accidents under this fee arrangement. So it's very affordable. It's the responsible move to protect your rights, to protect your family, to protect your health. And I recommend it 100% of the time.
Right, right. In terms of injury, either if it is say in terms of your car getting damaged. What about the physical injuries? Sometimes, as you said, it may not reflect immediately. Later on, you will come to know. But a lot of people, even if they are citizens of the United States, people don't want to get into unnecessary hassle, especially if they are in a rush to either go home or go to office, or if they are on vacation. And that
Right.
time you just want to forget about it. And especially if you have not had that difficult thing, especially for person who is traveling to the US, or you are moving away from, you are rushing to the airport, something happens, you may want to forget. How should you look at this? If I call the police, okay, but how does that process work? Does the police also dissuade you from filing cases there? Does it work in, what is the role of insurance companies there? Do they want such cases? In several places, you'll see that the system develops where that nobody wants to spend much money on your companies also don't want to spend money, so they just want to put a lot of things under the carpet. I want to understand this. And as an individual, sometimes it can become very confusing. Sometimes with different voices, the police might say something, or the insurance company might be having immediately if they come to know about these things. How does that work? I don't know. As a lay person, it can sometimes be very confusing to take the next step in such a situation, especially if you are a victim.
Yeah, I think it's overwhelming for people who live here who have never been through the process. So I can't imagine traveling to another country and then having to go through the legal process and contacting police and not understanding what my rights are in that other country. So in the United States, it's very important. If you're in a rush to get to work, your wages that you'll miss are actually part of your claim. So if you miss work or miss your flight or have to go to the doctor or all of these things, these are all part of the damages that you'll be able to be compensated for at the end of your case. So understanding that it's not just about the property that was damaged, but even your lost wages, your missed work time. If you are compensated by using vacation time or your sick time to go to the doctor, those hours that you had to cash in from your employer are actually able to be compensated as well. So making sure that you understand the most important thing you can do after an accident is to be checked out by a doctor, because if you're not getting checked out by that doctor, you don't know how injured you're going to be down the road.
Right, right. One more thing, when there is this sort of a thing happens and there is so much of, there can be people around you in India, at least if it, several people gather and there are people around you. Many a times you would get different advice, different voices, and you don't know anything, whether it's a US citizen or from outside. There was this whole concept about ambulance chasers also in terms of, legal profession. So I want to understand, how do you decode that sort of a advice at that point in time? How do you know whether someone is saying the truth or someone is trying to build not a business for you or a case for you, but for themselves. How do you look within through this and make sure that your interests are protected and not you are creating a business for someone else?
Well, ambulance chasing is the idea that an attorney who is maybe a bad business person needs to chase down clients by following an ambulance to the hospital and saying, "Sign up with me, I'll help you." That's an insurance tactic to try to minimize what our industry does. And it's been incredibly effective. People don't make claims when they could. And that's because they think, well, I'm not going to waste an attorney's time. My neck is sore, but I'll go through the process of just taking some ibuprofen and I'll be okay. But what you don't understand is your spine and your vertebrae are incredibly delicate, especially with age. You have the uh, degeneration of discs that are the gellulous cushions between the bones in your vertebrae. And if you have an issue that wasn't causing pain, and then after an accident does cause pain, that injury could be worth tens of thousands of dollars, and you'll need real treatment. You'll need medical work done on your body that you'll have to pay out of pocket to get for someone who crashed into you. And so I try very hard to overcome that obstacle that the insurance companies have created by just educating people who I have no interest in representing, like this right now. I have potentially no business interest from anyone outside of the state of Washington who might watch this. But I think it's important for people to understand what their rights are. And that doesn't necessarily have a direct business impact on me, but it does have a direct insurance impact. And I think that helps people. And that's what's really important, is helping people to understand that if they're a victim of a car accident, they should absolutely make a claim. They should absolutely be compensated. And they should speak to an attorney to make sure that what they're getting is a fair deal, because the insurance companies are businesses. And their role in this process is to keep as much money as they can so that they can continue to operate at a profit. They're not going to exist if every single case they paid full value for. And so they're looking for people who don't know their rights. They're looking for people who they can push into an early settlement for $500 or $1,000. And that might seem like a lot of money to some people for what they perceive as just a little bruising and maybe their neck hurts. But after, a month or 2 months after you've signed that release and you get your $1,000 check and your neck's still hurting, you might finally go to the doctor and realize there's more to the story that you didn't know about. And that's a sad, sad, sad day.
Right, right, Joshua. One more thing. If I'm the US or anyone is the US or any other state, and they return back to their own state or to their own country, just because something has happened, you have at that spot, you have just filed one small complaint, and then you have moved to the airport and you have come back. Afterwards, you find that you have got some problem because you did not want to miss your flight. You are having those issues. You go to a local doctor. Can you pursue a case like this where apparently there was not much damage done, not physical injury, but you are facing a problem later on? Are there any, do you have any recourse? Because you can't go back to the US again, file a case because it's too expensive that way. Are there ways one can connect a lawyer like you?
Yes, that's actually one of the only benefits of the post-pandemic world. Is the legal industry has been incredibly slow to incorporate technology. But post-pandemic, we've actually been forced to all be very aware of Zoom and have cameras on our computers, and so you can do meetings with attorneys virtually in any state. And so there's no reason that you would have to fly back to open a claim. You just have to have someone who you trust to protect your interests in the state where the accident occurred. So I encourage people, if you're in a rush to get to the airport and you can't wait for the police even, to just take as much information as you can and then contact an attorney when it's convenient for you, because that treatment can occur in India or in your home country, whatever that country is. And we can still work on the claim here with your medical treatment being in other countries where you're whatever that injury requires. I'm sure you can get the same quality healthcare in your home country. So it makes sense to just have an attorney who can connect with you remotely.
Wonderful, wonderful. There is much to understand about all this, Joshua, and who better than you to help understand these things? You also have a podcast where you have discussions. So tell us about that. And also, what is the best way for people to connect with you, learn more about you, and get help from you whenever needed?
Yes. So we're very active on Instagram. Brumley Law Firm is our Instagram handle. We also, like you mentioned, I have a podcast that's just being announced at the end of this month in January. There are episodes that are live right now that haven't been posted, but India will be the first country for me to make this announcement. So no one in the United States knows it's live, but Iron Mind Podcast is our podcast. You can go to ironmindpodcast.com, brumleylawfirm.com. You'll get information about my book that I'm working on that will maximize people's recovery for car accident cases. Very important advice. And the podcast is very specific to people in the car accident industry, but it's super helpful information for anyone who's going through that process already.
Right. And what is the quickest way for them to connect with you? Where to connect? What is the best way?
BrumleyLawFirm.com will have links to all of our assets and our phone number, 833-83-CAR-CRASH.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.